Antiquities. So for the moment, these are just preliminary results. The excavation will go on for 3 weeks. We also started to do an extension of this excavation on the southeastern part, and we just found a massive, big structure which is clearly connected to this ensemble of rooms, and we don't know for the moment if it could be a kiln or something else, but we have to do further excavations. So to conclude, I would like to thank the Department of Archaeology and Museums, Government of Pakistan, and Culture, Tourism and Antiquities Department, Government of Sindh, for their collaboration, and because this excavation season really provide very interesting results, and I thank them a lot for their support. And I would like also to thank all our other partners, sponsors, officials, and philanthropists, and the people of Jamal Carrillo, because without them, this fieldwork will not be possible. And I have to give a special thanks to my friend Salim Baidi. Without him, the work will be very difficult in Nawab Shah. So thank you so much. And finally, I wish to thank all the members of the team, including my dear colleague Gonzague Quiron, who are not with us on the field, but who brought a very important contribution to this program. And I would like to thank all the students and trainees who took part in 2015 and 2016 to the excavations at Daro. Because as I mentioned in the technical session, every year the mission welcomes MS, MPhil, PhD students in archaeology and young professionals of cultural heritage, assistant curators and field officers for training programs in field archaeology in Daro. And these young people come from various institutions: University of Sindh, Jamshoro, Shah Abdul Latif University, Qaid Azam University also in Islamabad, Culture, Tourism and Antiquities Department, and the Women Fund Trust for Preservation of the Heritage of Sindh. And I would like to thank all the scientific partners for their cooperation in this training program. And I would like also to thank the Embassy of France, which provided this year 3 scholarships for Pakistani students to have more specialized training in our labs. And because, for us, these young people are the future of archaeology in Pakistan, and we have to support them and to thank them for their contribution. These results also are due to their contribution. So finally, for the last minute of my presentation, I don't know if the sound will work, apparently not, but I would like to show you a short trailer of a video. I mean, it's just 1-minute video, don't worry, filmed by a friend of us, Mr. Abraham Farid Hashmi, who kindly came to the site. So it gives you it's like a teaser of a longer video of about 8 minutes I can show you later. But let's go. I don't know if it will work with the sound, but we try. No sound, huh? Okay. So thank you very much. Sorry for not having sound, but thank you very much.
While I set this up, Assalamu alaikum. Munjo nalo Uzma Rizvi ahe. और माँ अमेरिका कहाँ आई आहियाँ मैंने कहा थोड़ा सा मैं भी झाड़ लूँ थोड़ा सा देखती हूँ क्या होता है चलें as I set this up I want to begin by thanking I want to begin by acknowledging and thanking the National Fund of Mohenjo-Daro, the Department of Culture, Tourism, Antiquities, Government of Sindh, for hosting us here at Mohenjo-Daro. Of course, this would not be possible without the organizational skills of many, specifically Dr. Kalimullah Lashari, Asma, thank you so much, and Sajid Khan, and so many more. Itne log hain yahan jo kaam kar rahe hain excuse me. So, thank you, everybody. Thank you very much, Senator Saiba. मैंने note किया कि आप like you've been a very active participant, and I really appreciate that. So thank you very much for that as well. All right, thank you. Thanks. So I want to begin, but I also want to make sure as I move through the slides, I'm going to switch between English and Urdu without betraying either, so that we can have maximum amount of people understanding what I'm saying. So my paper today will focus on a ubiquitous material form that we are all very familiar with, which is the brick of the Indus city. And I've utilized this as my touchstone, and the key concept here that I'll be working with is the idea of materiality. This is an important touchstone because what it does is it allows us to understand and develop ways of thinking about infrastructure and planning and development. And through a consideration of planning and development, we also get an understanding or some deeper insight into some of the political philosophies that may be guiding certain modes of trafficking bodies through urban space. Impacting and creating, what I argue, is the urban subject. अच्छा, अब मैं इसको समझाती हूँ आपको. So, जो हम कहते हैं ना कि मिट्टी की असर होती है, उस असर को मैं समझना चाहती हूँ कि ये ब्रिक्स का असर क्या था, राइट? एंड वो जो असर हम कहते हैं कि ये पानी का असर होता है, मिट्टी की असर होती है, वो असर हम में होती है, राइट? हमारे बदन में होती है, हमारे चाल में होती है, हमारे बात करने, हमारे लहजे में होती है. तो उसको समझने की मैं इस वजह से सिर्फ आर्कियोलॉजी को लेके, थोड़ा सा फ़लसफ़ा को लेके, थोड़ी सी मैंने आर्काइवल रिसर्च थोड़ी सी की है, और सब मिला जुला के वापस हम मोहनजोदारो ही आएंगे और उन्हीं को समझेंगे जो हमारे से बहुत पहले रह चुके हैं यहाँ. हम भी जब चलते हैं इन्हीं रास्तों में तो वही मिट्टी हमारे ऊपर भी आती है और उस मिट्टी का भी कोई असर होता है, राइट? उस असर को मैं जांचना चाह रही हूँ, मैं सोचना चाह रही हूँ इसके बारे में कि क्या है, इस असर क्या है. So this is an approach, it's a very simple approach, very simple illustration of one of the many case studies that I have developed in my current manuscript on the politics of things. And so we will begin with the foundations of what materiality, or what materially really helps exemplify the urban, the Indus brick, something we see here all the time. And you know, this is something we are intimately familiar with as scholars of the Indus, and so I will not spend too much time on the brick itself. But I do want to spend a moment to acknowledge the implications of mud brick and baked brick, the aesthetics of each, the thermal and sound insulation of each and the differences, the impact of water and how one is more resilient than the other, which is particularly useful if you have baths or wells or drainage systems and flood protection systems. These bricks are literally the building blocks of the urban fabric, the structuring agents that provide foundations for successful planning. Perhaps one of the more banal technological achievements that mask socio-political motivation. Indeed, if we think of civic planning and infrastructure as being related to power, these bricks then become the foundation for technopolitics in the Indus. The average mud brick and baked brick is 7 by 14 by 28. The average size of the bricks for the city wall were 10 by 20 by 40. These are all numbers all of you are aware of. The ratio, as Mark talked about yesterday, 1:2:4, is quite standard across the urban landscape. And Greg Purcell called this the Indus proportion, and so I was kind of raised with this idea of an Indus proportion. And when Mark talked about this yesterday, I thought it was so interesting to think about that proportionality in relationship to the body, right? So he was citing a certain study, but to just bring it back home to Mohenjo-Daro, if there is some sort of understanding of proportions through fingers, we understand then how closely linked the Indus body was to the Indus brick. Michael Janssen has referred to this as a ratio, this ratio as a guiding ratio of the houses and reflected in the urban plan. And a vast majority of that urban plan was also set upon cardinal, is it too loud? Let's see. So a vast majority of the urban plan was also set upon cardinal directions, except for a few exceptions. And so if, by and large, our ancient person was walking through the city, they were walking essentially through a ratio. So my question then is, what does it mean to walk through a ratio? If we focus for a moment on the everydayness of the ancient subject, who existed within an articulation of socio-cultural and political form, we might be able to see the technopolitics in relationship to the development of standardization and a formal ratio that informs the built environment of Mohenjo-Daro. My focus on infrastructure and planning in order to understand the urban subject is a long-standing one. I've been working on this for a few years now. And I have in past presentations and publications looked to primary forms of archaeological data. This is my eyesight now. Specifically the waste management system and the drainage system of the city of Mohenjo-Daro in order to document the disciplining of the body in the architectural space where it produces waste. This is based on the recognition that the most basic form of life, the concept of the lived body, shifts from an understanding of biology that creates waste to a social body that lives within a particular context, constituting a self that is governed in the production of waste through space and seclusion articulated in the urban form. And so building on that study, and building on many studies that a lot of my senior people have done, I come back to this question of walking through bricks. And my main interest here is in ancient subjectivity in order to more fully contend with ancient sociality. The way I think of subjectivity in this project has to do with behavior, experiences, identity, and an individual as assemblage. This assemblage that recognizes itself and other self as actants and attributes agency to both itself and other selves. And here I'm working with some of Guattari's early work on subjectivity. So अगर मैं ये इसको एक मिनट के लिए समझाने की कोशिश करूं कि हम एक ही वक्त में मुख्तलिफ लोग हो जाते हैं, हमारी हैसियत जो होती है वो मुख्तलिफ होती है. तो मैं यहाँ खड़े होकर आर्कियोलॉजिस्ट भी हूँ, ठीक है, लेकिन इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि मैं माँ नहीं हूँ, कि मैं बेटी नहीं हूँ, कि मैं किसी की बहन नहीं हूँ. राइट? तो अगर हम सोचने लगें कि एक इंसान की जो आइडेंटिटी होती है, जो शख्सियत होती है, वो बहुत सारी चीज़ों को मिलाकर बनती है एक चीज़, तो वो मैं समझना चाह रही हूँ कि जब ये जो शहर बने हैं पहले वाले, तो उसमें उन्होंने वो जो नए शहरी बने हैं वो कैसे बने हैं, वो क्या मिलावट थी उनकी शख्सियत के बारे में, जो हम लोग अलग अलग अगर कर सकें उसको फ़लसफ़े के हिसाब से, तो कुछ समझ में आए हमें इसके सिलसिले में. Does that make sense in some ways? The idea of an assemblage, right? The idea of a collection of many different forms of behaviors, experiences, identities that will make you who you are. And the main identity here and the main experience here that I'm relying upon is this aspect of walking through a ratio and what that might have in terms of its philosophical implications for the urban subject. My query related to ancient sociality when it comes to the Indus world always gets stuck at a point when I'm faced with centralized power. Right? This has been my constant wall. So rather than positing the question directly at what form of centralized power we are looking at, I'm interested in looking at these traces of that power on the projected movement of bodies. The centrality of power is already in question, of course, and as Mark Knoyer has argued many times, and rather robustly, that looking at some form of centralized power is misguided, and he has posited the existence of many different mercantile or guild or just spaces that are bound by walls as certain kinds of centers of multiple powers, maybe even, that were responsible for the urban phenomena. The insistence on mercantile or craft specialization is not surprising in general, given how much material the urban centers produced, but it is not all that makes the space urban. Also, significantly, is Rita Wright's work on the Indus, which has looked to the archaeology of the built environment, particularly with regards to forms that provide information for an axis of value based on complexity of technology and an access to resources. Her argument takes into account not only the material correlates of the city, but uses the concept of rarity as a recognition of value. Now, the insistence of discussing the various relationships between value, monumentality, craft specialization, and the archaeological record has its own history. And this is where I'm going to do a little bit of epistemic work. I'm going to do a little bit of trying to understand what where our questions have come from and where they emerge from. तो हर सवाल का भी एक कोई तारीख होता है, राइट? जो हम लोग सोचते हैं, जिस बारे में सोचते हैं, जो सवाल करते हैं हम लोग, वो भी कहीं से सवाल आता है, वो भी किसी माहौल के हिसाब से सवाल बनता है. हम हर सवाल, हमारे साइंस में भी यही होता है कि हम जो सवाल करते हैं आर्कियोलॉजिकल साइट का, वो भी हमारे माहौल से को मद्देनज़र रखते हुए, पॉलिटिकल एस्पेक्ट्स को रखते हुए हम लोग ऐसे सवाल करते हैं, राइट? तो मैं अब लेके जा रही हूँ आप लोगों को 1950s में, जो एक ख़ास एक आर्कियोलॉजिस्ट थे, वी गॉर्डन चाइल्ड. And he wrote a very important piece called The Urban Revolution. And we tend to, as archaeologists, use that as our touchstone. And really take to heart constructing the notions of urbanism in antiquity through his list. In his article, he provides what he calls the 10, and this is in quotes, 10 rather abstract criteria, all deducible from archaeological data. This is often essentialized into certain aspects of urbanism, including things like population density, surplus of food, taxation, monumental public works, social stratification, systems of recording and numerical notation, systems of writing, art, trade, and craft specialization. This is a list that many of us as archaeologists are very aware of. And it's had a very significant impact on the way in which we understand and think about power and ancient sovereignty. So in order to understand what I consider our over-reliance upon craft specialization, and in particular its relationship to trade and technology in the archaeological literature about the Harappans, I thought it might be worthwhile to revisit at least one of the 10 criteria, and keeping the economy of time in mind, I will only present the first few sentences of number 6. And here's a quote straight from V. Gordon Childe. They were, in fact, compelled to invent systems of recording and exact, but practically useful sciences. The mere administration of vast revenues of a Sumerian temple or of an Egyptian pharaoh by a perpetual corporation of priests or officials obliged its members to devise conventional methods of recording that should be intelligible to their colleagues and successors, that is, to invent systems of writing and numerical notation. Although he mentions writing, it is always in relationship in this case to a numerical system. Right? This point is not so much about writing per se, but rather a standardization of value in the service of economics. Within the Harappan context, one of the ways in which we refer to this in many different ways, but one of the easy ways we often refer to the standardization of value is through standardized weight system. The interconnectedness of standardized value and its relationship to economics is key to understand why so much of our literature has focused on craft specialization. Now, Childe was not operating in a vacuum, and I've spent some time looking through his notes and his work and kind of doing some archival research here. In fact, it was quite the opposite of a vacuum. He was known to be someone who was really absorbed to a point of saturation, the plight of the world. Everything that happened in the world really deeply impacted him. And as he reflects much of his concerns brimming over in the world in a post-world moment. So if you think about this in terms of post-World War II and the kinds of developments that are coming through on a global stage, those are all impacting the way he's understanding and he's developing these theories of urbanism. Definitions and discourse of standardization was a very timely and contemporary issue in the 1950s. And you can actually sit and look at a lot of the development of these charters and documents that I'm about to talk about and his choice of words that he uses in these articles. The definitions and discourse of standardization were very timely and contemporary in the 1950s. The International Organization of Standards, or what we call the ISO, was founded in 1946. And by 1949, the North Atlantic Trade Organization, or what we call NATO, was established, and definitions of standardization were in place by 1950 in both institutions that included the idea of standardization as crucial for the concept for the urban, that allowed for value to be constructed in manners that expedited and efficiently dealt with order, compatibility, interoperability, interchangeability, and commonality,